With a little time in hand now on BBC1, a look at the past with The History Man.
You know, if you want to really understand the past, you just have to roll up your sleeves and get stuck into it. We used to call them the Dark Ages, because we knew so little about them. But nowadays, things are brighter and clearer. And here at West Stow, the archaeologists excavated an entire village and then rebuilt it as it looked at the time. But more than that, the members of the Dark Ages Society, with their meticulous attention to period detail, have breathed life back into this place with the sights and sounds of Saxon England. Even down to building houses with only axes and bare hands, not a Black & Decker in sight. Mind you, why do it yourself when you can get the slave to do it for you? Fetching and carrying, coming here, going there, even bringing home the groceries. Not that I ever saw the choicer cuts of meat. Once they'd been cooked, the nearest I ever got to them was serving them up at the banquet. In fact, being the lowest of the low, I got just enough to make sure I stayed in working order. I'd have been happy to get my hands on something as simple as a chicken.
You know, when I was at school, they used to tell me that the Anglo-Saxons were a really sordid, primitive people, and that it was just as well William the Conqueror had come along with his superior French ways and kicked them into shape. Well, despite appearances, it's simply just not true. By the standards of the time, a lot of the Anglo-Saxons were doing very well indeed, thanks very much. Ow! Ah! Well, some of them were anyway.
You see, the Saxons were skilled artists and craftsmen, but first and foremost they were warriors. And the arrival of friendly fighting men was a festive event in the village. The triple blast of the horn was their way of telling the villagers not to be afraid, but to start opening the butts of ale and mead, because that night there'd be feasting and drinking, storytelling and singing in the Thanes Hall. These were the real heroes of Anglo-Saxon society, and whenever they came home, they got the Kenny Dalglish treatment from the welcoming crowd. But the tales of heroes were for the hours of darkness, and whilst daylight lasted, there was always work to be done.
Slave, what about the oven?
Met todas machte, und is moed je thonk weok, wolde vader.
But when darkness draped about the hall and firelight flickered upon heroes' faces, then the old tales were told of warriors skilled in the ways of war and the winning of legend, of generous gifts of golden goblets to those who had been foremost in the field. But one poor old slave had his mind on something far less grand.
Mind you, the one compensation about being an Anglo-Saxon slave is at the end of the night, when they've all had a hornful, you can slip off into a quiet corner and pour yourself a beer. All right, that really isn't fair.
Defending a nation on land, sea and air.
If British industry was run by the services, we'd be Japan.
For the past year, the BBC has gained unique access to the very heart of Britain's defences, the government's nuclear bunker, the elite Pathfinder force, and the firing of a Trident missile. the decision makers, and the risk takers. From top brass to top guns, a major new series, Defence of the Realm, begins tomorrow at 10 on BBC One.
The midday news on BBC One now with Andrew Harvey.